Hey folks, welcome to the last event, the closing ceremony of HacktoberFest with Aviyel. It's been a great occasion. Here we have Lars with us to actually conclude the occasion. He's joined us to actually support the open source community in our endeavors. Hi Lars.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the announcement
Yeah.
of the winners.
We actually started this whole idea of with non-code contributions. So as we know, a lot of these Hacktoberfest contributions, maybe 90% or more of them are actually code contributions, and nobody cares about the non-code or documentation or so on that happens behind it. So we actually made the whole theme of the event as non-code, so that people could actually contribute with submissions that are non-code. We got a lot of articles, we got a lot of content, and reviewing through that, it was an amazing occasion. The number of people who showed the love towards open source and actually appreciated on the work that we did. It was amazing to see the sort of support open source got. So we had the event starting off from a very subtle point of view with Insha Raman coming in. So she was the one who actually flagged off the occasion, and then we had a whole week of decoding open source, talking about how open source happened to come into action, and then how people actually got into open source or any of these contributors, how they actually worked with it. So we had Muthu, we had Uncle Big Bay, we had Kartikeya Rawat, we had Pradam Saraf and so on, actually talking a lot about open source. And then for the next week, we had Mastering the Art of Tech documentation, which was headed by Harsh Bardhan and Yuri, which was an amazing couple of sessions, especially Harsh Bardhan's session, which was full of technology, and he was very passionate about what he was talking about. And then for the last week, we had a closer look at, which was very project specific. We went over from a lot of projects, including Kiosk Genius, Kiploy, and so on. We had Tapas, we had Manas, we had Jean Kesmar from Tolji, we had Amit, we had Emil Pierce from Novu, we had Animesh Patak, and so on. And that's how we ended up with the whole 3 to 4 weeks of Hacktoberfest. And all of this was followed by a lot of content submissions which we were getting. And we have been overwhelmed by the support, and we haven't had enough time to even go through everyone. And it took a lot of time and effort, a lot of overnight discussions to actually figure the whole thing out. So we have a couple of leaderboards up, and this is the week 3 and week 4, which is we have Buluatif Fahmi for the first creator. We have Berimu Dennis Kinyungu. He got the second. Ikra Firdos got the third. Sriniket got the fourth, and Esther Christopher got the fifth. So these are actually a couple of the top creators of 1 week. For the rest of the 4 weeks, for the rest of the third 3 weeks, we actually have it on our Discord, which is on the HacktoberFest with Aviyel page right below the Discord. Thanks, folks. Thanks for all that you guys have done for it. And then today we have Lars. Lars is actually an open source enthusiast, is a veteran of the scene. He's a lot into FOSS, and as long as he does his paid gigs, he also is a very devoted FOSS enthusiast. So today we have with us Lars. Lars, welcome to Aviyel.
Thank you. And this is so amazing. It's a good message to get out there that open source is not only about code or code contributions. It's also about the broader community and ecosystem. And for sure, technical writing is a huge part of that, whether it's documentation, even answering questions on Stack Overflow or GitHub discussions, writing articles, tutorials, workshops, books, events. All of that is part of open source because it supports the open source project. And the more the open source project can do to support this broader ecosystem, the better the community will be.
Got it. So Lars, when we started the whole discussion on, so this is actually in the format of an AMA and also a discussion. So let's start at the beginning. What got you excited about open source, and how did you get in? Do you actually remember the first PR you ever made?
Yeah, it was back in 2014, so more than 8 years ago. I created my account on GitHub, and a few months later, I opened my first pull request, which was merged. And that was actually for technical writing. It was an free and open book about the Backbone JS framework. There was a book by Adi Osmani of the Chrome team now. So he wrote a Backbone JS fundamentals or something like that. And I opened a pull request to fix a code snippet in the book, and he merged it. And that was my very first experience, at least on GitHub.
Oh, that's crazy, because that is one thing a lot of our viewers would love to know, because a lot of people would think, non-code is not the way to actually put up your first PR. But yeah, it's one of the craziest ways to do it.
Yeah, well, so technically it was a code snippet, but it was part of a book. So it was part of technical content.
Got it.
So that was a great first experience. And since then, I have done many similar things myself. So I bet that's something we can talk about today.
So you've been a very, very influential person in the Angular community, or like you're very well known in the Angular community. So are there any special contributions that can make contributors stand out in a community or so on, especially when it comes to Angular?
Make you stand out? No, just do whatever you feel comfortable doing. We have a community called This is Angular, where we welcome people of all skill levels to publish their content on our content. We have a publication on dev community. We have a newsletter. We have tweets about your articles. We have a weekly talk show. So there's many channels where you can get your content promoted, and we have a private but open community of writers and other contributors. So something like that is a good place to start because you can get support and motivation from other peers like yourself. So that's primarily how I started 5 or so years ago in the Angular community. Did a little speaking, did a lot of writing, and joined a community of writers. And now I have my own community of writers and contributors with Santosh Yadav. So yeah, just keep doing what you feel comfortable doing, or even get in touch with people who can push you a little bit, because sometimes we need just that push to go ahead and do it and do ourselves that favor.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. Everybody has that influential person who actually pulls them or pushes them even when they're like in trouble. So who was that person for you? Like, do you have a few fond memories about people who pushed you into it?
For sure. I had been doing like knowledge sharing internally at the companies I was working with, but I hadn't taken the step to do it in public yet. But I was visiting a local Angular meetup in Denmark, and a person who's now a very close friend of mine pushed me to come and do a talk at the meetup. He said, all the things you're doing at work, it sounds very cool. Would you like to come and share that with us? So it took me a long time, but I prepared a talk, and after that, I launched an article series and got included in the most technical Angular blog in the world at the time. And that's what kicked off my career. So I was very, very happy to get that push from him. And today I'm organizing that meetup myself with a group of awesome people.
That's one journey that actually happens a lot in tech too, which people don't understand. So there was one other question. You've undoubtedly been in a lot of communities, especially Angular, and headed quite a few. So what are the great characteristics of a great community?
Yeah, that would be, I have recently created a talk about open culture in open source communities, and that is a set of ideals that we should strive for in our communities if we want them to be healthy and growing and welcoming to people. So the core values of an open culture is openness, transparency, and inclusivity. So a good open source community with an open culture will enable all community members to use and copy and modify if it's a software product, regardless of the level of experience, skill set, the origin of the member, the resources available, access, anything like that. So there's a few key areas to something like that, and my favorite ones are open communication, open development, open documentation, and open governance. So in each of those categories, there are open and closed culture items, ways of doing it.
Got it.
So So I have collected my experience in a set of guiding principles or metrics that I call the community experience. So there's 5 of them. And the first one is time to first experience. So how long does it take any person to try out the software product? And next one is the time to first line of code. So how long does it take anyone to write their first line of code using the project? And the third one is the time to first environment. How long does it take anyone to have an environment under their own control that runs the project, the open source project? The fourth one is time to first contribution. So how long does it take for someone entering the community until they're able to make their very first contribution, whether that's code or non-code? The fifth one is about ecosystem support. So it's making content creators and speakers and other people that are part of the broader community that makes a lot of non-code contributions, supporting them with whatever they need from the open source team.
Got it, got it. I think these are very valid parameters of what a community should be, which actually a lot of people don't look up to. And when you get into a community, it's very important for the seniors and the people who are like veterans there to actually talk to you or like, motivate you to do that first PR.
Yes, so it's about having especially newcomers in mind and giving everyone access and communicating in the open using open channels. Yeah. Of course, it's difficult to reach any, like this is the ideal community. It's difficult to reach ideals all over all these aspects, but we can strive for getting as close as possible, and especially the ones that makes most sense to our community or our project.
I think that should be the standard to look up to as a community. I mean, that's what at least we'll be looking up to as Aviyel, as a community that has a lot of people involved. And like, yeah. So I want to ask another question. So you're the maintainer of This Is Learning, and you've been the co-founder of the same. So and also this is Angular. So could you tell us a bit about these projects and what they do actually?
Yes, so they are just communities. There's no business involved. There's no product. Because everything's free, and we're using free or very cheap software to run our platforms. So, for example, we have 2 publications on Dev Community, one called This Is Learning, one called This Is Angular. So, of course, Angular content on one of them, and everything else related to tech or careers on the This Is Learning publication. So anyone can join just by contacting me or Santosh Yadav, and you'll be allowed access to publish on our blogs, and you can get your items featured in our Twitter profiles, in our newsletter. You can be a panelist or a guest or even a host on our weekly talk show, and we're producing content and free and open development guides and text-based courses openly available to everyone in the world. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and we could also use help with things like graphical content, visual identity, and creating a website. So there's plenty of opportunity for contributing. I think you could train to become a developer advocate in our community, and we could help you support that.
Got that. So talking about communities, so we use a lot of platforms for like hosting our communities on, right? So these are the 2 valid questions when it comes to tech: Discord or Slack?
Yeah, well, I think it's clear. It should be clear to most people now that Discord is for community. Slack doesn't care about community unless you pay a lot of money.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Even now, like I'm part of still part of quite a few communities on Slack, and they are practically useless now with the 90 days retention period of messages. So now there's just a lot of empty channels sitting there. So that's quite a bad feeling. And if you look into the paid options, you have to pay a lot of money for having a free community.
It's over the top. It's over the top, yeah. Than having Discord, Nitro, or so on. So, being the maintainer of an open source project, it must be a lot of hard work because as and when we talk about democratizing the open source space, or opening the whole space up to people, it's a lot of work maintaining the same. So being a maintainer of an open source project, what do you say, or what are the tips that you have for people who are just starting out?
For the people starting out or for the maintainers?
For maintainers, first time maintainers and so on, starting their own project.
Okay. For the maintainers, well, make sure to keep the contributors in mind. I think I lost your video, Isaac, but I'll just keep talking.
Yeah.
There you are. Okay, I lost you for a second. Okay, so for the maintainers, keep the community members and the contributors in mind, also future contributors, future community members. So open up issues that they can contribute to, and you will be surprised that there are actually people who are willing to contribute if you make it easy, and if you support them, if you guide them through that journey. And your time is better spent doing that some of the time than trying to do everything yourself, because that's what grows the community, the project for the future, rather than staying in your lane and just focusing on your own issues.
Yeah, so when we come to that, when we come to being a maintainer and then talking to open source projects, or to the people, the users of the open source projects, how important do you think technical documentation is in a project, especially an open source one?
Well, I just joined a pretty popular open source library as the lead, the documentation lead, because I think it's very important, and it's often neglected. And there's lots of developers who don't know how to or don't like doing documentation, and it is two different disciplines. There are professional technical writers for a reason. It's another discipline than writing the code itself, but it should have a high priority on the same level as the code itself, because if you don't have documentation, you could argue that it's not really open source because no one other than yourself knows how to use it, how to modify it, how to deploy it, and so on. So documentation, there's many parts of aspects of documentation as well. Like there's documentation for end users, there's documentations for the core team, there's documentation for contributors, and so on. So it's a lot more than just end user documentation.
Yeah, got that. Because at Aviyel, at least, community is the core of what we build here. So when we actually built it, documentation has been a very core part of the whole build. That's something we actually focus on a lot, especially technical documentation. Because as you said, inclusivity and diversity is one thing, but then if you want people to be inclusive of anything, you have to get it in different languages, especially technical documentation. Get people involved, get people to talk. Because a lot of the communities that we see right now, and a lot of the communities for projects that we have right now, becomes only a hub of Q&As, which could be easily provided on a technical document. So that is a very valid point that you raised. So how do you get people to contribute to a project as a maintainer? Get people on to write code, fix bugs, and so on.
I create issues that describe what needs to be done other than just a title, so that anyone can look at it and try to understand what do we need to get done here. And then making small tasks, like something that's achievable even without a lot of insight or knowledge, because those are things that usually those are things that the core team doesn't really have time to or want to do all of them anyway. So whenever a community member can take on an issue like that, that's great help. And you really get surprised when you make an effort to write good issues that invite other people to contribute, that someone will say, hey, I would like to do that. And then you guide that person, and who knows, maybe that person will become part of the core team. I mean, that's also a value we should appreciate in open source, is that people will join the team based on their efforts and their achievements and results in the context of the project. So the more contributions you do, the bigger the chance that you will be accepted as a collaborator or a contributor or even a team member on the project.
Yeah, totally. That's something that has always come up. So, as a maintainer, are there any tools, are there any specialized tools that you can use to actually make a project maintaining a lot more easier, the actual task of doing, like maintaining the project?
Yeah, I think first thing is recognizing that issues is about more than bug reports and feature requests. It can be used to organize all your work on an open source project, but especially the fact that it's not just bug reports. There's everything can be in an issue. The name is pretty bad because an issue sounds like it's about a bug, an issue, a problem, but it's not. So having a lot of open issues isn't necessarily a bad thing for a project. Of course, we should manage the number of open issues as well. There's also the other end of the extreme is thousands of open issues, and no one wants that either. But there's a healthy balance in between where there's enough work planned and you've prioritized it and you're inviting the community to contribute. So, of course, GitHub is usually the place to be for open source. So use the issues, and the new GitHub projects is also pretty sweet. Started using that myself for projects. I've used it at work. It's very flexible, but for people who want a rigid setup, it's probably not really for you, at least not yet. You have to configure it so that it fits your project style, your planning and project management style. But the whole idea about the new GitHub projects is that it should be as easy to configure as writing a project management system in an Excel spreadsheet. So everyone should be able to do it. You shouldn't have to be an expert or take a course to do it or get a certification or something like that.
Got it. Yeah. That's like one of the core things, like maintaining a community, or like as you said, even organizing things is a very important part of an open source project, because a repo with a lot of issues that have come up and people just juggling out for any issue to solve is also a problem that people don't even realize. People might think, a lot of issues, a lot of people coming in, but no, that's not the case. You've been a very
So hopefully if you set up a view on a public GitHub projects, hopefully it should become more clear what's going on and what's the direction of the project. We also have milestones, but it's not as powerful, but that's also a useful tool for people to get insights into
basically like a roadmap, which actually could lead up to what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
So you've been a very well awarded or like a well appreciated person in the community. So, and especially you've had GitHub stars 2 times in a row. You've been a GitHub star. So what is exactly the secret behind that?
Well, it's based on community nominations. So make sure to nominate I think you have 3 votes per year for GitHub stars. So anyone with a GitHub profile you can nominate. 1 nomination can be enough, but of course more than 1 helps as well. But every single nomination is reviewed by the program committee at GitHub. So just your 1 vote could make your favorite contributor the next GitHub star.
1 vote. Every vote matters.
Yes. So that's the great part of the GitHub Stars program. It's based on community nominations, but also that it appreciates all parts of open source and community efforts. So activities that could make you part of the STARS program is open source development, of course, but also organizing communities, writing articles and books and speaking at conferences and things like that. So it's an appreciation of the broader ecosystem of software development, not only code contributions.
Yeah, it's like getting a Nobel in the open source world. And you got it 2 times in a row.
Yeah, it's a really great program. Yeah, it's a really great program because I think there's 18,000 nominees, 18,000 different people were nominated, and there's we just reached 100 active GitHub stars, and the way it has been planned is that you can only be a GitHub star for 3 years, then you become an alumni. But I think they are looking into if they can extend the 3-year period if you're still doing great work in the community. You have to renew it every year, so it's not like you're not. If you get it 1 year, you have to earn it for the next year as well, and the third year, or even the fourth. It's not automatically renewed. You have to make new efforts in the next year, or you will not.
I think that's a great characteristic for an award. You have to earn it again and again, and it makes you work a lot more harder.
Yes, but there are programs where you don't need to do anything every year. So I really appreciate how this program works. I like being close to the GitHub product teams, and it's just a really great program in terms of the conferences. That there's a GitHub Nova conference just for GitHub stars and GitHub employees, and it's an awesome conference. You also get a lot of nice swag and support for promoting your work and being accepted at conferences if that's what you're like, things like that. So yeah, it's a really great program. I really enjoy being part of it, and now I'm on I earned it 2 times, right? So currently I'm trying to earn it for the third time.
Let's go.
And hoping that maybe they will extend it past 3 years if I'm so lucky.
You got my vote. You got my vote.
Oh, thank you.
So what exactly are the extra responsibilities that come on you as a GitHub star, other than like talking at conferences and so
on? Well, it's continuing to make contributions. You do have the opportunity to learn directly from the GitHub team. You get early access to feature previews. You get free products, for example, GitHub Copilot and GitHub Code Spaces and other awesome products from GitHub. So you get to try out the newest things, and you get to give feedback on the new products. And there's so much time and money being invested in new GitHub products and features. So it's really nice to be part of that journey and be able to give early feedback. And then again, that could help me in my work and in my content to stay aware of what's happening down the road for GitHub.
Got that. So interestingly, GitHub Copilot actually learns like a little bit before. It's an AI pair that you can use like when you write code. It helps you write code. So what do you think about GitHub Copilot as a product? Because there are mixed reviews coming out, right?
Well, I think it's great. I've been using it for more than a year, and I will never write code without Copilot again.
That's a very interesting thing, because as a person who's been in the scene for a long time, and if you have to go from your normal VS Code terminal to actually getting help from an actual AI bot, that's a long way to go.
Yeah, so that's a good thing about something like Copilot. It can help newcomers to technology, but it can also help experts get work done more quickly. I think I'm not allowed to share any numbers, but there's a significant amount of code being written by AI, by the people using Copilot, and it'll only grow in the future. And I don't think we should be scared of losing our jobs to robots, but when we can collaborate with AI bots, that's where we get the best result. We can get everything done quicker and better.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point, right? There's a human vision or like a human processing capability, but we're not as fast as computers. That is the point where AI actually comes in and then helps you process data faster. So I think that's a great enabler of genius, whatever it is.
I was really shocked by how well it works in a lot of cases. It learns it knows all programming languages, it knows all frameworks, it knows all libraries, it even knows your own code base, your own libraries, even though if they're private and proprietary. It's aware of which files you have open, which one you edited the most recently. So even when you're changing from one file to another, it can kind of predict what you want to do. Like say I was just writing a piece of code, then I go over to a Markdown document, the documentation for this code, and it will suggest like property names and things like that. So you just get really surprised sometimes at how smart it seems to be. Of course, eventually you learn how it thinks. So you also learn how you can get the best from it. But still, sometimes you'll also be surprised by how stupid the suggestions are. So it does need human supervision. You don't just let it auto-generate all your code. Because the good thing is you can let it suggest a snippet, and then of course, you have to review it yourself. You should be thinking like another programmer wrote the code, and you're reviewing the code, both from the functionality perspective, but also from a security perspective and a stylistic perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at coding, it's more than writing lines of code, right? So it's basically you're creating your own artwork. And as an engineer or a person who's developing it, you're the man in control. And anything that helps you, if it's a better paintbrush, when you're doing an artwork, you use a better paintbrush, right? I think it's just like that Copilot came into existence, and like you can use it on free will.
Yes, there's nothing that's perfect. GitHub Copilot has received a lot of criticism as well, and some of it is valid. Especially when it comes to like the licensing issues of open source being used in the training data set and things like that. But there are ways to circumvent that, or to prevent you from getting into licensing issues when using GitHub code. I wrote a small article about it, and lots of people have looked into it. And of course, Microsoft and GitHub has expensive lawyers trying to figure out what's right or wrong in terms of legal issues as well. But we'll learn as we go. Nothing's perfect, and they did spend a lot of time trying to address all of these issues before going public. Now it's public, like a few months ago, and that's a really amazing product. Of course, there's problems with every piece of technology. I'm sure it will be addressed no matter what the issue is.
Totally. I mean, the first iPhone wasn't exactly the best iPhone that came out, but yeah, it was a groundbreaking product. I think GitHub Copilot is the same. It has changed the whole way we code. Because tomorrow, when you write a piece of code or you're writing software, this actually helps in reducing a lot of manpower used, or like a lot of man hours being used. That could actually be put up to more productive usage.
Yes. Yeah, we will see more AI related to code, to writing code, to testing code, to the security aspect of code, and everything in between.
Yeah, totally. So when we come into the last section of the whole discussion, so what do you think is the future of open source, as in general? What do you see like key points that you see in the future that are coming up, like where the open source community is heading to?
The future of open source. Yeah, it's difficult to speak about the future except in retrospective. But right now, it's a huge buzzword, open source. That will die out eventually. It's not the first time open source was a buzzword. So there's many businesses trying to use open source as a way of just funding the project, but they have no interest in the open values of open source. So I don't think that will be a huge success for everyone. So I think we will see them, but the positive thing is more interest in open source. That always helps. I think we still have an issue with not enough, especially companies sponsoring open source. They get so much value from open source. So the least we could do as companies is send some money back to the open source ecosystem to make it sustainable, because it's a struggle to try to earn a living just doing open source. I mean, I just had 1 month of paid time off, and I have done a lot of open source and open learning contributions, and I would love to do that every day, but I have to earn a living, so I can't do it. But I got the sense of how much can you do when you have full days available just to focus on open source, and was a great feeling. You could really make progress on things that usually takes months to get through when you're doing it on your own spare time.
And the fact is, this one change you make in a project, or like the hours you spend, is actually a lot of hours saved for another developer sitting maybe 100,000 miles away from you. Because I believe every one of us uses GitHub repos, even if we haven't contributed one line of code. And I think people should take up their time. I mean, maybe an hour in a spare weekend or so on. And I think that's what we're trying to solve in Aviyel. We're trying to solve monetization, like sustainability of open source communities and how they can be monetized or how revenue can be generated, so that this is a self-sustainable cycle.
Yeah, another good thing about open source is that you learn a lot and you get to know awesome people. And so that's part of what I really like about open source is sometimes if I'm frustrated by my day job, I use open source as kind of like, even though it's also programming like my day job, right? It's different because I can work on exactly what I like, when I like, and I can work with the people I like to work with the most. And when I don't have time or energy, I don't have to do it. When I have lots of energy to use, whether it's just feeling good or whether it's a lot of frustration, open source can help. I use it to balance my life, my energy as well. So that's a nice aspect of open source to me.
Yeah, I think open source is a movement. It actually enables you, and it tells you, like, it makes you feel like you're contributing to the whole world, or like you're changing the world for you. Other than like working for a company, or like you're working for a certain number of hours, which actually pays for your gigs. And then in your spare time, you work for the world. You feel like the Avengers coming on together.
Yeah, and even when it's not a popular project, whatever, if you're part of a team, it'll also be like a good experience just working with nice people and making something together and learning together. Because learning in public, that's also a big part of open source. It's where you can test your skills. It's where you can get your knowledge out there, shared with others, and especially with non-code contributions.
Got it, got it. So we have got a couple of questions and answers that have come up. So let's
Great.
go to the first question. How do you get opportunities like jobs from open source contributions?
Mm-hmm. Well, first we should make sure to expand our view of open source to beyond just code contributions. I've been doing public contributions for 5 years or something, and it has landed me my previous job I had for 3 years, and the new job I'm joining tomorrow. That's because of the visibility I have in the community, because of all the contributions I've made through articles and talks and books and software and everything in between, being part of communities. So yeah, there's definitely jobs to gain just from open source. And another aspect is if you're contributing a lot to an open source project that's backed by a company, there's a better chance that they will hire you because you're actually contributing. So they already know the level of your code skills and your familiarity with the code base. So it's a good opportunity if you really would like to be hired by a company doing an open source project.
Yeah, I think it's a very open portfolio. It's like a personal portfolio on the web, and a portfolio where you're actually helping people or like impacting people in the long run.
Yes, yeah. Even just like interviewers, like employers and recruiters are asking for GitHub profiles now. So by having contributions, yeah, they can already see that you're doing good things. Even look into your code. Like, yeah, okay, so he knows Angular. I can see he's contributed to Angular projects and samples and whatnot, or even the Angular framework itself. So yeah, open source benefits you and your career.
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point because today, as in like we have a lot of college students that are part of our communities, and even first-time developers are like college graduates and so on. So in the recent years, open source contributions have been one way to actually prove their metal towards the world. And we have a lot of contributions coming in from actually, students or like the age group of 18 to 25-year-olds, 24-year-olds, and so on. That's been amazing to look at young people getting involved in open source.
Yeah, for sure. I love every time someone joins the This Is Learning community, because since I'm not earning money from people's contributions, so I have no problem appreciating and accepting that the interest in making contributions will not be the same every year or every week or every month. So they will come from time to time and contribute something to our community. But because of that, it's important to also invite new people into the community. And it's the same with an open source project. The open source core team will not stay the same. The community members will not stay the same. So you have to make sure to make it inclusive and welcoming and open to new people, or it will die out eventually.
Yeah, yeah. For all the folks who are listening right now, this is learning is a community and it's a platform where you can actually learn and even talk about stuff related to code. So we actually have it onboarded on our platform. And welcome, Lars. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for joining for the session.
Yeah, should I answer the last Q&A by Adam?
Yeah, there's one more Q&A. Yep. Is there a roadmap that can be followed to become a GitHub star?
So becoming a GitHub star should not be a goal in itself. It should happen as a side effect of doing other awesome things. So, and that's how I became a GitHub star. I was already doing the awesome things, and my very good friend and co-founder Santosh Yadav became a GitHub star, and then I was nominated by someone, and I was very surprised that I got accepted. But yeah, it's been one of my greatest achievements. So it feels very good, but it's also after 3-4 years of doing public contributions. But I'm also a Microsoft MVP, and it's kind of a similar program, a bit more focused on Microsoft products. But I'm part of, like, my efforts are within the realm of web development primarily. So there's room for people in the MVP program as well, even if you're just doing web development like me. I think I lost Isaac. I hope I'm still live. Okay, you're back, yeah. Isaac. So the roadmap is make contributions. Try different contributions. Like I have enjoyed writing a lot. I've written lots of articles. I've written a book, and I'm working on more books. We've done courses and development guides as part of This Is Learning. So I really like the written word, technical writing. It's a good place to improve, and I'm writing documentation as well. So all of that those are contributions that could pave the way to become a GitHub star or Microsoft MVP or anything like that. And maybe you like to speak, or maybe you should at least try it and see how it feels. And if you do and you think it feels bad, well, I can assure you that it usually goes a lot better than what it feels like. That's happened to me time after time. Even after years of public speaking, I did 10 years of public speaking in non-tech first, and then 5 years in tech now. And I still get nerves, and I still feel like overwhelmed and feel like it didn't go well. But then I view the recording and I feel better. And I can see that, it was just my nerves, and it actually went pretty well. So yeah, and usually I get good feedback from people as well. So yeah, you are your own worst enemy. So try to fight that imposter syndrome, but we are lots of people who get it even after 15 years of speaking. So try it out and see what it feels like. It can be great, and it's a good way to build your network. Speaking, start at meetups, and you'll get a chance to speak at conferences as well eventually. But there's many other ways to contribute, and every way of contributing to the community or an open source project those are activities that could earn you the GitHub Star Award or a Microsoft MVP Award.
Yeah, very interesting insight. Very interesting insight. I mean, that was a totally great question that came up. Is there a roadmap that you can actually follow to become a GitHub star? It's just work, work, and work. So there's another question that's come up from Sriniket. It is what are the key points to remember while going through large code bases for the first time and contributing to them?
Where was that question asked?
Here in the question and answer section, Sriniket J. Right below you.
Okay, I found it now. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, if you're having a hard time, I would blame the open source project, because they could have helped you through documentation and other things. Like there's an extension for VS Code called Code Tours, where you can get a guided tour through the repository. So anything like that would be helpful for you to get an overview and a map of the code base and the different parts of it. So, but if those are not available, I mean, hopefully there's an API reference and you can go from there to the piece of code you're interested in, look at the source code, and then from there you go to the tests. There should be some tests. And if there's no documentation available, usually there's documentation through tests. So the tests can show you how the piece of software works, because they are exercising the code in a granular way usually. But a good open source project should have a guide that tells you what you need to do, the first steps to become a contributor, and hopefully it can also be a guided tour through the code base, the important parts and the important tools they're using in the project.
I think that was the answer to that. So, what would your advice be for a new open source contributor? Sohaib Ahmed has asked that.
Find an issue or talk to the open source team. Don't start to do work that you think needs doing and then open a pull request without talking to the team or finding a relevant issue first and commenting on that issue. Because then your work might not be accepted and you'll feel bad about it. So find work that's actually that will be appreciated, and there's a better chance of it being accepted into the project. And through that, you will also learn about the standards and the contributing, the development process, and what it takes for a few commits to get accepted and merged into the project. There might be things you're missing, but you'll figure it out as part of the contributing guide and as part of getting your pull request merged. Other than that, well, even if you don't like documentation, it is one of the easiest ways to get started with an open source project to contribute, because it's often neglected, and even minor things like correcting a typo or some grammar or adding to something or rephrasing something can be a valuable contribution. And you usually don't have to know a lot about the tooling involved in that. Whereas the tooling for the code is usually more extensive, so there's more things to learn. Whereas the documentation is usually about editing a markdown document and contributing or opening a pull request, and then not a lot of to do from there. It's usually an easier contribution to get accepted by an open source team. So it's a good entry point, contributing to documentation. And especially if you're reading a guide or a tutorial that's part of the documentation and you see something that doesn't quite make sense or something that is almost certainly a mistake, well, open a pull request, and hopefully it's as easy as clicking a link that says edit this page, and you open a pull request on GitHub and get the thing done very quickly.
I think, yeah, that answered that question. So the last question of the day: how to become successful? How to become a successful technical writer in the open source world?
It's easy. Write a lot.
That's like a one-line answer.
But yeah, that is the way to do. Just keep writing. Find a community that can give you more exposure, can get you some feedback. So that's why we have the This is Learning publications, because on dev community especially, you'll have an easier time being discovered if you're part of a publication. So we have an open publication where anyone can join. So we have everything from people writing their first article to people with a decade of experience who are open source maintainers or solution architects or framework creators or senior developers, junior developers, everything in between.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Lars. I guess there are no questions on the ground anymore. All the questions have been answered. It was a very insightful session. Thanks for joining in for the closing ceremony. Thanks for standing for open source.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really, if you have a similar event next year, I'd be happy to.
We'd love to have events as soon as possible, whenever you're free. We'd love to host you out again. It was lovely having you. Folks,
Great. Thank you for all the questions.
Yeah, let's thank the public. And then do check out This is Learning. It's on the project section of Aviyel. I think it's already live right now. Am I right, Lars?
Yes, we just got it accepted a few days ago. So that's where you can contribute to our GitHub repos, but visit our website and you can see all the things we're working on, all the opportunities you have as a contributor to join and make contributions.
That sounds great. I think that this is the last event and it's been a whole month of events and so going on. Let me just drop the week 3 and week 4 winners of the last week, the leaderboard. It is Boluatif Fayemi on number 1, Berimu Dennis Kinyungu for number 2, Ikra Firdos for number 3, Sriniket for number 4, and Esther Christopher at number 5. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the submissions. It'll all be dropping, and then the list of the top 5 people who get the swag boxes and so on will be announced on the Discord very soon. So get up on the Discord. Let's just wait for it to drop. We're still planning on the winners because it's a very tough fight. It's a lot of articles. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of great content. I think everybody participated very well, and the amount of quality we were getting for every article made it very, very tough to judge on one article. And I think all of them are amazing. Thanks a lot, folks. I think it's time to sign off. What do you say, Lars? How's the day?
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for taking part in this event. I love seeing events focusing on technical writing and other non-code contributions because that's also very important and something I have been trying to support for the past 5 years myself.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Lars. I think we're about to sign off. See you guys.
Bye.